Thank you. This is a panel that I guess has a lot of attention on it right now, and I think we've heard a few things this morning about some of the important aspects of growth and whatnot. So we put this panel together with some experts from different areas that are working actually in the field dealing with these issues and have been for some time. So I'll just introduce the panel real quick at a high level, and then I'm going to give them a chance to more speak to what they're doing. So on the left of me is Evan Neel. Evan's from Lancium, and I think they're working with some of these large hyperscalers. And so he's got that kind of an experience and background, and Evan used to work over at ERCOT at one point, working with our large load. And so he has that experience as well. Then we've got Clayton Greer, who's working on these large data centers in the development area. Meagan, who's with the transmission utility Oncor, that's getting a lot of these requests, and she's dealing with that. And then Camilo, who works with the generation supply. So hopefully this will be a pretty nice round discussion from different people's perspectives. That's what I hope for. My name is Bill Blevins. I've been working with the interconnection processes at ERCOT for quite some time, and this large load topic. I will put one piece of information out. I had a presentation that I had to do in February, back when we had some of the cold weather, and I just pulled some information from the winter storm Uri timeframe to now, or actually till February of that time, so a couple of years. We actually had 48 gigawatts of generation that synchronized to the ERCOT grid since the winter storm, which is more than I actually believed we could do. And 29 of those gigawatts had gone commercial. That was about, I think, 146 battery projects. I think there was 29 conventional projects, 116 solar projects, and I think about 50 projects that were wind. So a lot of activity in the generation supply side, but now we've got this load that's coming on. And I think that just says we have to keep doing that. We have to keep on both sides balancing that equation. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Evan. Evan, if you want to start us off, just give us a little bit of background about yourself and what you are doing.
Yep, sure. Thanks, Bill. So as Bill said, my name is Evan Neel. I'm the Director of Regulatory and Power Services at Lancium. At Lancium, we develop gigawatt scale campuses with the purpose of serving hyperscaler loads. The one you've probably heard of is the Stargate project up in Abilene. That'll be 1.2 gigawatts serving AI data center training load. And so we're working really hard to bring that online quickly and reliably. So working really close with ERCOT here. So I guess maybe just going into a little bit of what we look for when developing these sites is there's a few things. So first is going to be availability of power. Second is going to be large amounts of land. Then we got fiber access, access to a good workforce nearby. So that's why we're building in some place like Abilene. And then you're also going to need water. Those are for the cooling system, and that could be open or closed loop system, but you're going to need water either way. So those I see are the important ones and what we look for when we're developing a large site. Obviously, I think power is the most important of all of those and probably the most scarce, but I think a lot of people also overlook land. So, as Bill mentioned, we have a lot of load in the interconnection queue, and I think if those gigawatt scale interconnection requests aren't coming with a significant portion of land, say they're on like a 50-acre plot, I would bet that they're probably not getting built. But yeah, that's just a little insight on our side.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen the scale of one of these campuses, but I mean, for people in the audience that have not seen that either, what are we talking about as far as kind of that 1.2 gigawatt campus that you are developing? What's the scale of that?
Massive. Yeah, I mean, so I believe we plan to ramp that up a little bit bigger than 1.2 in the future, hopefully. And we're looking at the scale of millions of square feet, probably tens of millions of square feet. We're currently procuring more land out in the area. I wish I could just show you all a picture, but there are imagine massive Amazon warehouses stacked into sets of 4, and then you copy and paste those about 8 or 9 times. I mean, just huge. I mean, you could wander around the campus for a good few hours. Maybe we can get some ERCOT folks out there pretty soon.
Yep, sounds good. I guess I'm going to kind of pass the baton over here to Clayton, and I know, Clayton, you guys have been doing some of this development as well. Do you have kind of a similar feeling about what y'all's needs are besides the power grid?
Right. I mean, the power grid is obviously the number one. As far as size, we are also developing sites mostly in the 1,000 megawatt. That is where the market is right now. And our sites, from an acreage standpoint, range 700 to several thousand acres for those sites. And the idea, you can put 1,000 megawatts on roughly 300 acres. But the idea is you want to find somewhere that you can ultimately grow. And as the 765 grows in Texas, that'll obviously provide more points of access. Right now, it's just so difficult to get anything through the interconnection process that's really the binding constraint that we're dealing with.
Well, I think that passes the baton over to Meagan. Meagan, you're working with a lot of those requests and those access requests for connecting up these large loads. You want to talk a little bit about what you're doing and kind of some of those challenges?
Sure. Good morning. Thanks, Bill. So Oncor is a transmission and distribution utility operating in the ERCOT market. We deliver electricity to over 4 million homes and businesses across the state. Starting, so all the way out west from Orla, which is almost New Mexico, over east to Tyler, and then from up north in Wichita Falls down to this area, Round Rock, Temple. We also have some transmission infrastructure in the Panhandle, although we're not the load-serving entity there. Within my group, Transmission Services, we interface with customers that are seeking to interconnect to the grid, whether that's load generation. We also interconnect with other utilities across the state, and so we're really the main point of contact for all loads connecting to the transmission grid and represent our customers internally.
All right. Camilo, you're kind of the guy that we need to be able to, once we put the connections in place to supply the energy, and appreciate you being on the panel today. Can you talk a little bit about what you are doing?
Thanks, Bill. So I work for Vistra Energy, Vistra Corp. It's a power company that owns about 18,000 megawatts of generation here in the ERCOT market, which is somewhat less than the 20% limit, a little bit less. And we are a company that not only includes the ownership and operation of these power plants, but also we serve to customers, right? We serve through our retail brands like TXU and some others, but also we directly contract with large customers with a variety of contracts, right? So with this transition or this new wave of interest on data centers, we're going through quite a bit of an evolution on the kind of requests that we're getting, or the kind of reaching that we're receiving. It started, maybe Meagan, this is something you can elaborate later. You may have seen similar experience, but I think maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, some of the first requests we got were, I want 5,000 megawatts. Where can you find 5,000 megawatts for me? And I want it as soon as possible, short of saying tomorrow, and I want it clean. And that's how it started. And through time, we're evolving into slightly different conversations, right? Into maybe some more manageable sizes that can be handled at single locations. But also, the renaissance of nuclear or any other technologies that are different from solar and wind and batteries now are part of the discussions. And also the concept of flexibility, right? Before it was, I don't want to be interrupted at all. I want 5 nines after the first 99 in terms of reliability. Now with time, I think we're seeing, in the conversations, we're seeing a lot more, openness and flexibility, including this concept that maybe not everybody in the room is aware. You know, the ERCOT market, when you think about trading, right, power, a lot of these forward curves that we see are set by 5 megawatts trading 1-2 years in the future. And it's hard to say that, you know, that it's hard to contemplate that as a deep market, right? 5 megawatts is not really a lot. But now that we're having all these conversations with data centers, you know, for a first time after a very long time, we're hearing discussions of, you know, long-term contracts, right? Either heat rate call options or other kind of flavors of contracts that basically secure a supply for, you know, more than 2 years, right? Which is what we're used to in the markets, but much more than that, maybe 5, 10, 15 years. So that's kind of what we're dealing with now.
So I guess one of the questions that I've heard mentioned earlier in some of the other presentations were this ride-through issue and kind of how these data centers are being constructed. You know, just from the outside looking in, these are very large. You mentioned the thousands of acres and infrastructure that's there. And I don't know what they're doing in those areas, but I'm hearing things that are quite interesting, where there may be some combination of, you know, internal equipment that y'all would be putting in to help ride through these disturbances in the grid when we have weather like what's coming in today. And dealing with those things as part of the infrastructure that y'all are looking at building and putting in place. Is there anything that y'all can talk about, you know, as far as how that's developing?
You want me to take a shot at that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there was an event that occurred in Virginia where they lost 1.5 gigawatts of data center load all at one time. The event that caused it was a transmission outage, and they tried to reclose that. You know, they had the initial fault, and then they tried to reclose on it 5 more times. So on the third time, they had a large amount of that load trip off, and they found what in the backup controls for the data centers, they found what NERC is calling a 3 strikes type control, that it measures, you know, voltage drop, you know, 1, 2, 3, and then the data center is out. It flips over to backup gen, which is fine for the data center. The data center is served fine. And even through the events, it's on the battery backup system, so it's actually, you know, never sees an interruption at all. But for the rest of the grid, what it caused was an over frequency situation and a over voltage situation near that area. That's the entire Eastern Interconnect that they moved. If that happens in ERCOT, there's going to be serious problems here. We can't handle over voltage or over frequency or over voltage, but over frequency is the bigger concern because of the overspeed tripping of generators could cause a cascading event. So ERCOT has written is it a PIGR or an NPRR? The 122, that's a PIGR. Yep. That limits interconnections, and this is not just an individual interconnection, but it's an interconnected region to 1,000 megawatts right now. We're supposed to have a presentation next Friday, I believe, on a study that was run that may increase that to some degree. But what we have to understand is that's an electrically close region, which is probably, you know, like take the South Dallas area where a lot of this load is developing. You have Watermill and you have Venus that are very electrically close, so you're probably limiting that entire region to 1,000 megawatts. And so really we need to solve this problem, even if it's, you know, if it's not 1,000, if it's 1,400 or if it's 2,000, that's still too low for what there's I think 37 gigs trying to connect in that area. So we need to resolve the problem more than try to figure out what the limit is in my mind. I think that there are some simple solutions. There's 2 aspects of this. One is the control of the backup gen. That needs to be reprogrammed. There's also, whenever the data centers are going on their up system, it's like a 5 to 40 second delay before they come back to grid. That is also very difficult from a dynamic standpoint to manage. So we may need to look into the up systems and the controls on those to come back immediately as soon as they see line power.
So I guess, Evan, you're also dealing with this. Are there other solutions that are being considered at some of these larger data centers?
Yeah, I would just echo Rayon.
Try this one.
Yeah, so I would just echo a lot of the stuff that Clayton said and just really reemphasize that a lot of these issues are really front of mind for the hyperscalers as well. I mean, I think, they're not completely ignorant to how the grid works. I mean, they understand if you build a gigawatt data center and it trips off and you have an overfrequency event, I mean, that's game over. That's kind of a worst case outcome. So they're actively exploring a lot of these solutions. Us at Lancium, we're actively exploring a lot of these solutions. And like Clayton said, it could be as easy as going in and modifying the settings to the UPS, to the backup genset, to have a solution where the loads can essentially ride through to any of these issues. I think we're looking to work pretty closely with ERCOT to understand where those boundaries are and understand that, because a lot of the hyperscalers are really looking for some type of criteria. So I think communication could definitely help go to solve the issue to an extent. And then I think there are also more bulletproof solutions to the problem as well that would address other issues. So not just the load tripping off in the event of a voltage event, but say something happens mechanically at the site or in the software and the load trips off, right? That's not a voltage ride-through event, but it's still a huge risk that can also cause an overfrequency event. So if you start talking about putting in, physical infrastructure behind the meter at the data center, maybe it's a big battery, maybe it's an extension of the UPS, maybe it's some type of StatCom. All that work is kind of being done to figure out right now. But you could minimize the risk of having a voltage event at the site to begin with. And then in the case, say maybe it does trip off, you could possibly use a battery to smooth that load drop. So instead of it all losing at once, maybe a battery can smooth it out so it ramps down over the scale of 5 minutes or whatever ERCOT would think would be acceptable for reliability.
Talk a little bit about the AI, the ramping from the AI.
Okay.
So he's going to cover some interesting aspects of certain types of data centers, which I think is related to AI.
Yeah, Clayton's going to put me on the spot with the hard question here. And it's this concept that I'm sure some of you have heard of. I've seen it in some of the other groups talking about this, where the load profile of AI data center training load can ramp up and down quite quickly. Or say maybe it's an inferencing data center and the load profile could be based on the demand of using that product. So essentially, you could see large ramps in the load very quickly, and if we're scaling up at a data center size, obviously this could present a problem for reliability. And so again, I think this is very front of mind for a data center. I think, I describe this to people who say, oh, aren't you worried about the data centers coming online and wrecking the grid with flipping on and off? I say, well, if you connected a gigawatt load and like it was a light switch and you just flipped it on and off repeatedly, what do you think is going to happen? And they'd say, oh, well, the grid operator is probably going to turn you off. And I say, okay, well, if you know that, I think the hyperscalers know that too. So they're not going to do that. That's worst case scenario for them. So there are a lot of different solutions. I think kind of the level 1 solution is what you'd call maybe flaring compute. So in the instances where the load is ramped down, and I usually say my analogy for why it would ramp down is it's kind of saving its game, right? It's doing all of its computes, and then it has to save and checkpoint, and that's where you'd see that dip. During that dip, you could just run whatever problem you want to solve. You could do SHA 256, you could sum all the real numbers from 1 to infinity, whatever. But you would see that compute still taking place, and your load profile would be flat. Of course, that is not so efficient from an energy consumption standpoint. And you're starting to see other companies start to put out products there that are essentially batteries behind the meter that can work in sync with these data center load profiles to smooth that out. So again, you would see a load profile that's much smoother, but maybe you're not wasting so much energy. And I guess if we're just talking about the bulletproof solution like a battery, that's kind of 2 birds, 1 stone when we're also talking about the voltage ride-through issue. You want to add anything?
No, you covered it really well.
I guess I'm going to shift the gears a little bit, get some of our other panelists going here. So Meagan, can you give us just what you're going through as far as the interconnection process, maybe kind of expected timelines and things like that for folks that are interested in that area?
Sure. Well, it's a challenge. If you went out and looked at our annual earnings report from the end of 2023, you would see that we had 40 gigawatts of load currently being requested in the queue at that time. By the end of 2024, that number had skyrocketed to 137 gigawatts. And those sorts of numbers, along with the in excess of 200 gigawatts that ERCOT is now forecasting by 2030, 2031, just shatters your typical planning process. So it's a challenge, certainly. We understand that not all of these projects can develop. We think that there are speculative and or duplicative requests in the queue. And so one of the things that we're doing to combat that is requiring certain, what we're calling confidence criteria requirements. So things that we would need throughout the process of an evaluation for a project anyways, we are beginning to roll these out and requiring them up front to distinguish the more serious projects. At the same time, the legislature is working on Senate Bill 6 right now, and we anticipate that will create additional requirements that will add on when it is written into law. Another thing that we're doing on a smaller level is a couple years ago, Transmission Services created an interconnection support team, and that team is focused on the development phase of large load projects, which leaves the regions to focus on projects that are ready to execute an agreement and move on through the engineering, procurement, and construction phase.
So, Camilo, I guess one of the things that I'm hearing a lot, and I don't know how involved y'all have been so far, but every one of these really large data centers have all this standby generation for backup and reliability. And when you talk about, I mean, as many gigawatts as we're talking here, that's a large number of generators that are just, you know, they're on standby. And these are folks that basically operate data centers, but now will have huge generation capability. Are they looking at people with experience in the region and trying to get, you know, those folks involved with those generators to some degree? I would make sense that maybe that's happening. I just don't know.
I'm not sure I can speak. Thank you. At least with the folks we're talking to, I think the majority wants to, I think believes in staying in their lane, right, for everybody. I think in terms of operating, maybe owning and operating the facilities that are for backup, I think we've seen a lot of interest for those to be actually owned and operated by companies like us. We've seen also interest of them just owning it themselves, but really maybe the operation and maintenance to be on our side. I think you know, something that Pablo mentioned earlier is that, you know, ERCOT has a more like a capacity challenge, not so much an energy challenge, right? And I think to the extent that this data centers are coming with their own backup generation, in a sense that basically could work as these data centers not being seen by the grid in times of high scarcity or high demand. And I see that as a, or we see that as a huge, you know, gain, right? Not only do they ensure their supply, but also for anybody that has gone through, you know, the URI experience, you know, for us as a generator, there was this big stigma, right, of any of our plants not being able to perform at its best during a time of such need. I would say that it's a similar incentive, right? If you're a data center and you're not necessarily, quote unquote, considered, you know, a vital need, right? You certainly want to be on the side of, oh, you know, I was actually not even seen by the grid in those times of high need. In fact, I was actually giving back everything that I would normally use, right? So I think there's incentives, quite a few, not only financial, but also, you know, in this case, you know, people incentive for those backup generation to be there and to be utilized, perhaps more than not only during the EEA times, right? Of course, we believe in well-designed markets, right, in price formation, so that those assets can be coming into the market at the right price with the right with the right representation of their value.
Okay, so I guess as far as some of these other questions that I've got, I'm going to go ahead and try to see if we can get into something a little bit different. As far as the flexibility piece of this, I think that's kind of one of the things that we started out with at ERCOT, this large flexible load task force. And I think there's a variety of different people that use that term, and maybe it means certain things to different folks. But could y'all kind of dig down into how that flexibility might play out in different scenarios for, maybe we got the Bitcoin miners that do one thing, maybe we got the, data centers that do certain things that do some other sort of flexibility, and then there's some more traditional, I guess, data center stuff. Can y'all talk to that a little bit?
That would be good. So yeah, I'll go ahead and take a shot at this. Bitcoin miners are the alpha dogs on the, they have control systems that will operate to price. And that price right now is generally in the $70 to $110 range. So it's a really good range for the market. So you see that load, and there's a considerable amount of load in ERCOT that trips off automatically. For data centers, it's a little bit different. We talked about the backup gen a little bit. A lot of the conventional data centers feel that that's backup. They want to leave it as backup. They don't, because if you're planning on supplying grid power with that backup generation, you've got to actually go through a gen interconnect process, and they're not interested in any of that either. There are some folks that want, I believe Enchanted Rock has, approached some folks to try to get, install natural gas backups. These are generally, 3 to 5 megawatt units that are, you have hundreds of them on a site. And so controlling that in and of itself is a little bit, complicated. And then controlling all that to market is definitely something you would need a good, solid QSE to run. So I think that we'll eventually get there, but I don't know that we're there now. One of the things that we have introduced, though, is a bill that's voted out of the House now, and that bill would give you a faster interconnect if you're a generator that's willing to commit by contract your generation, your backup generation, to be instructed by ERCOT during emergencies to operate. So if we get into a Uri-type situation, ERCOT would be able to tell this group of folks, hey, go on your backup gen. They disappear from the grid. If it's a Visa or type operation or a banking operation, they're still operating. We did actually have some operate that way during Uri. So this would be, good for the grid, and to the extent that we can get, 20 gigs of this stuff, that gives us a 20 gig cushion of loads that are coming in, supporting generation contracts in the market, and then also supporting their own load during emergencies. So you would have the excess generation that they have bought and paid for supplying the rest of the grid if needed.
So if I remember right, the opening presentation, Pablo said something about it would be nice to have that 20 gig demand response at ERCOT, and I think there's a path forward, it sounds like, but it's going to take a bit to get there.
Exactly. I think that, if we can get, and I know Senate Bill 6 has some aspects of this. I think there might be a merging of the two bills that gets it out of the, both chambers. And if that happens, I think it'll be great for the market. I think it opens up Texas as, we're here for business, open for business. If we can get the interconnections, I know that has its own set of challenges. But I think if we can get more of these loads in, ERCOT will be a much more reliable place.
Well, this is the Innovation Summit, right? And everything I'm hearing is a bunch of different technologies kind of coming together. Meagan, I'm going to probably start with you on this 765 transmission. I think I heard Clayton mention it a little bit. That's kind of some new news in the ERCOT region. And I just wanted to get the House panelists' different perspectives on the approval of us moving to that higher voltage now.
Yeah, Oncor is excited about it. We think it's a historic decision for the state of Texas, and even before the decision came out, we were getting a head start on preparing CCNs, talking with our suppliers, really preparing for if that's the decision that was made. So we're excited. It significantly increases the incremental capacity available, so it just makes sense. And so we're excited to continue working with the PUCT, ERCOT, and our partner TSPs to take it to completion.
I guess, Camilo, from the generator supply side, how are y'all seeing this?
Oh, yeah.
I think we welcome. We usually connect the dots of more transmission with the ability of the state and the grid to be able to take more load. So that's certainly a good correlation. I think one thing to note though, on when you think about it, this project that just got announced or just got approved, that's basically bringing all this transmission capacity to West Texas, to the far West Texas. It's really hinging on the fact that production of oil, production of natural gas in that area, there's very little flexibility to move that production somewhere else, right? I mean, that's where the oil is, that's where the gas is, so therefore you need the power to be right there, right? One of the big opportunities as we have these data centers is that other than, as you mentioned, the water and maybe the access to the network, right, the connection of internet, that is basically the only thing that I believe, I'm sure I'm oversimplifying it, but nothing forces you to actually be running your computation in a particular location other than the access to cooling and maybe, of course, grid and land, right? So in a sense, data centers also bring a huge opportunity of basically using either pricing or the access to grid to be optimized around that, right? So this concept of co-location or behind the meter, I usually try to separate not all co-located load is behind the meter, but all behind the meter is co-located, right? So this concept of co-location, right, whether it's behind the meter or not, we see that as a big opportunity for the state and ERCOT in general to be able to accommodate a lot of load by, in a sense, bypassing the need of large construction of transmission, right? Again, that's not applicable to all load, right? But specifically for data centers, there's probably, there's not that many, but there are a few of, large locations that are going to accommodate quite a bit, right? Absent some stability problems, 1,000 megawatts, 2,000 megawatts, that's very achievable, right? And the moment that you connect that to a place where there's already generation, almost by definition, you see quite a bit of connectivity already, right? So we see that also as a big opportunity, and we're hoping that through the process, both in the PUC and both in ERCOT, the PUC, and in Austin, we can see a lot more welcoming to that kind of interconnection.
So I'm going to turn it over to the large data center folks. And how do y'all see the approval of the 765?
Yours working?
Let's see. It's working. All right. We think it's fantastic. We're really glad that 765 kV got approved, and we really appreciate the detailed analysis that was done by everybody at ERCOT, at the PUC. We thought it was a really well-informed decision that was made based off of good engineering information, and so we're really happy with that and think it's the right path forward. And we also kind of think it's only the beginning. We would really like to see the ERCOT step plan be integrated over the next few years to build the backbone across the entire state. I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done with regards to figuring out exactly where the load is going to come in the states. As was mentioned by the other panelists, we really need to figure out what of that is real and material so that when we're building out the 765 kV system, we're prioritizing the right parts of the state first. For example, I think the Panhandle is significantly undercounted right now. I think you're going to see a lot of large data center loads move into there that could really benefit from a 765 kV prioritized to that area first. And I also think that there's a really important thing to note here is that when we're talking about interconnecting gigawatt scale loads, right, it's not distributed across the 69 138 kV system. It's all at one spot. There is no more efficient way than interconnecting that than a well-connected, strong 345, 765 kV node on the system. And as Clayton said, I mean, these loads are going to be bigger than a gigawatt, or at least they want to be bigger than a gigawatt. And so I think that's something really important to take into account. And something really interesting actually happens. We commissioned a analysis by the Brattle Group, and they did an excellent job showing that the impact to the rate base by serving, gigawatt plus size loads at those nodes on a 765 kV system is actually so efficient that if those loads come and contribute to the rate base, it actually lowers transmission costs for all customers on the system. It's that efficient. And so we think that's a really important aspect and should be considered as going forward. Now I'm going to say one caveat to this here. And Clayton mentioned it earlier with Pigger 122 and kind of limiting load coming to a single area. We have approved this 765 kV system for the Permian, and it makes a lot of sense to expand it across the state, but we need that load to connect in a timely manner so that it can pay for it, right? Because it's what's justifying the project. So if we are passing rules that are going to limit the speed that load can come online reliably, then the existing loads are going to have to bear the cost of that. So I think that's a really important thing that ERCOT stakeholders need to consider over the next few years is how do we ensure there's no delay in that load coming online, which is going to involve things that were mentioned, like initiatives in the legislature, queue cleanup, and just understanding which of the loads are real.
A lot of great comments. The only thing I would add to that is the basic need of transmission at all is to get generation to load. And the fact that, we've had a massive build out, it's getting back to the point Camilo made. There's a lot of solar, there's a lot of wind being developed in ERCOT. These large loads and a lot of loads in general have ESG goals. And so that is what we have to serve a lot of these loads. I know that everybody knows the sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow all the time, so we have to have the natural gas generation. That's great. But what we will need is enough renewable energy credits to cover over the natural gas usage that we're going to be required to have. And the point that I'm trying to make is that the good solar, the good wind is in West Texas or it's on the coast. It's not spread out through the grid like the loads are spreading out through the grid. You have, and like Evan was saying, what used to be a general, like a city type landscape where you had loads spread out through that city. These are huge point loads. And those point loads need distribution of energy directly to those loads. And the only way to do that efficiently is through very high kV transmission. And so this is a great step in the right direction. It does need to build out through the entire state. I think that a lot of the load build out, as the interconnects come, the load interconnects come, you'll see a lot more need, and that'll be self-fulfilling. But the more we get our mindset on the fact that this is needing to come sooner rather than later.
So I think one of the things that I heard Camilo say was kind of this mixture of the co-located data centers. I'm seeing a lot of that. I guess that's kind of new, where we've had some new rules not that long in place to where we allow for netting. But I just wanted to say, I think that there's other people out there that I've talked to in these large data centers. Some of them want to do the co-located. Some of them want to do more kind of PPA and get different supply. So I think that 765 does offer a lot of flexibility in how people would get their energy and meet their needs. So, just putting a plug in that I think as a holistic approach, it serves a lot of different purposes. Part of it is flexibility, which I think we need a lot as we talk about all these topics. But with flexibility comes complexity. And so, Meagan, I'm going to just drill down, are there any things, the tools or things that, maybe we need in being able to do this processing of the interconnection request any better? Are there areas of focus that we could use some of these tools like the AI or something? I hear a lot of people asking those questions. I don't know the answer myself, so just want to hear your perspective.
I think what I would like to see in the process is a coordinated and consistent way to both submit and sign for loads across the ERCOT system. I think we encounter some challenges when different TSPs do it different ways, and I think it could really benefit the market and all of our customers if there was more consistency there. And I think Figure 115 solves some of that, but maybe not all of it.
Well, I think we will end up having to evolve over time. One of the things that I hear is a kind of a growing possibility or a growing need is maybe having more of some sort of a cluster type study too. The way that we've done the study so far has been each one individually, but that's started when we had a queue of like 12 to 17 gigawatts, and now we're quite a bit bigger than that, and there's so many requests going to so many different companies. I am hearing some perspective that we may have to modify that process to some degree to account for multiple requests all at the same time. And I know that comes with a lot of work and a lot of new rules too. So I would like to see those new rules come in and us start using them. I think that'll help a little. And then we'll need to continue to work on this. So don't know where that'll end, but I appreciate your kind of perspective on it, because I know we are talking all the time about these things. So I'm going to shift gears because we've got about 13 minutes left before lunch. And we've got some questions out there. And I think I may have already touched on the first one, but it says, are there opportunities for ERCOT to use or leverage AI to automate? This seems like a question to me. I really prefer to, I think there are lots of opportunity for AI. I'm going to go ahead and shift to the next one. We've heard a lot about AI facilitating interconnection. Okay, sounds like this is a topic. We might want to touch on it. Have you guys experienced or understood it any way that we would be using AI in the future as far as this interconnection process? Clayton, you look like you have something.
Well, yeah, and you don't know it yet, but I'm getting ready to introduce NPRR and PIGR. The planning process for data centers and every load is to use you have the general single contingency cases, but then you also have contingency cases that are G-1 and N-1 or N-1 and N-1 after a period of adjustment. And what I want to introduce is a methodology where we allow a data center to sign a contract to use their backup gen as that manual adjustment, so that it would be zero in consideration for the G-1, N-1, N-1, N-1 type interconnect contingency request. So I think we move a lot more through the process if we go that route. It is complex, and there will be some additional what would be considered RAS type solutions needed, but we should be talking about this a little more next Friday if you want to. And I'll go ahead and share the language with you so that you can get over the first round of shock and confusion.
Well, I guess one of the things I would tell you is a struggle right now is when we're looking at those planning cases, looking 3 to 5 years out, and how much generation we have in those planning cases, and where should we try to put that generation in expectation that it will be built. That seems like a perfect question for AI to help us with. Exactly. In, taking the best guess, this is where, the things that a generator would need, and this is the best location. I think AI could help us with kind of zeroing in on that and helping us put more realistic generation in those cases that are out there further with all this load. So I think there's plenty of opportunity for us to learn. I don't know when we'll be able to start really testing and using that. And then I'd like to hear what some of the other panelists from the other ISOs are doing as well. But we need to learn from as many sources as we can. I'm going to go ahead. What does the panel think of a hard cap on the 1,000 megawatt? Does the size of the cap make a difference in your answer? That's to you guys, I guess, from the data center.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think we need to be careful when we're considering a cap. I mean, at the end of the day, the purpose of the grid is to serve the load reliably, right? And so it seems a little counterintuitive to me at first to put a cap on interconnection size. Now, I think we should be careful how we're defining that cap, right? If that's a single point of interconnection cap for reliability purposes, as in you can just, have 2 tie lines in, then totally makes sense. And I think a lot of transmission companies actually already have rules to facilitate something like that with a much smaller number. But if we're looking back at Figure 122 and we're talking about capping large areas at a gigawatt, I think there are a lot of other solutions out there that we can use to effectively and reliably serve that load, some of which we've talked on the panel today about.
Yeah, I think we don't need a Band-Aid on the wound. We need to treat the wound, and that's where, we had the discussion earlier. You need to go to the root cause of the need, and the need is based on these backup, these throwover schemes. And so we need to, hit it at the heart of the problem. And then, one of the things, I guess there's always a concern that somebody may not, they may just stick an old type control system in on a massive data center site, which is a good question to raise. So I think we do need a commissioning type program for these large loads, that they have to demonstrate that they can ride through an event, simulate a low voltage event similar to the ones that we've seen on the grid, or a series of them, and make it as exhaustive as possible, and make sure that doesn't, that data center rides through those events.
Okay. Yeah, I think there will be some discussions at the working group meeting to further kind of that 1,000 megawatt. I know that people at ERCOT are, going through studies at this point, trying to review those results and trying to look at, can we raise that number up to, something greater than that. I will say that we put that in there in lieu of not having something as a criteria, and I think we're willing to adjust that once we have some more facts.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the need. The way that, if we continue on the road that we're going, we're going to set up a time bomb that may go off at any moment in the state, and it's all fun and games until you black out the entire system. And I don't think anybody, especially the data centers, do not want that to happen. So, we just need to solve the problem instead of, coming up with Band-Aids is where I would go with that.
I agree. All right, so let me see if I've got a couple of more. Does ERCOT or utilities require any studies to be done prior to a standalone, not grid-connected data center load with a generator is set up? I guess I would start out with, I think the answer is yes. There are lots of requirements out there for us to do studies all the time. And so there's probably some NERC requirements out there that say we have to study the system when we're adding load. We've formalized the process. And I think a lot of the folks here on the panel and a lot of people out there in the audience have participated in that effort. But we do now have a process that we're waiting to get approved at the Public Utility Commission, which is our first interconnection process for these large loads. So I'll just answer that one off the bat. But I think y'all's perspective on that process and maybe how we could evolve it once, we get it in play.
Go ahead.
Well, I think, and I agree with all the things you said there, Bill, but I think another thing to consider there as part of that question is an islanded configuration, so something that's not even synchronized to the grid. And of course, everyone knows that speed is the name of the game here, right? And so I think certain data centers that are trying to come on quickly could use strategies to expedite their go-live date by starting in an islanded configuration and then bringing that generation over after the fact once there's capacity on the system, and same with the load. I think you're seeing this a lot right now with natural gas or aeroderivative turbines at our site up in Abilene. We're actually going to have 300 megawatts that's going to be islanded from the system to bring a few buildings online faster. That can be used as backup and then interconnected to the grid to be a resource to the grid as well. And so I think, considering how to effectively and timely bring those assets that are already existing and ready to go onto the ERCOT grid, quicker in the future would be something worthwhile considering.
Yeah, this just seems like a huge project management kind of issue where there's so many moving parts. I guess that kind of, we're going to take no further questions, let you guys break for lunch. But I guess If you have any last words, I was going to ask, if you could solve one of the key issues pressing you, if you had one particular thing that you wanted to have us address, what would that be? I don't want to hear the solution, just what you think are some of those key topics.
Clear standards for voltage ride-through and load ramping, and then get NPR 1188 implemented as quickly as possible so we can bring CLRs up to where they need to be so that all these flexible loads can integrate with the grid in the most economic and reliable fashion possible.
Okay, Clayton?
Mine would be to flush out the interconnection queue and make that a more productive type process. Get the lottery winners out or get the lottery players out.
I've heard that many times. I think there's a lot of opinions on that. Meagan?
Well, I already mentioned the coordinated, consistent process that I'd like to see for signing and submitting loads, but I'll also touch on maybe an improvement that Oncor can work on and that we are working on. We think it's really important for us to be communicating with our customers early and often so that we understand what's coming into the queue and what will be making its way into the queue in the future. There's a gap that we've been battling in timeline expectations to build out a transmission project and a transmission interconnection. And that was in place before data centers existed. And it's only gotten worse since data centers can complete their builds so quickly. So the communication piece is what I would add to that question.
All right, Mr. Camilo, you get to end us.
I think for me it would be how can we connect as much of this load as possible into the grid as soon as we can, not only from the perspective of what it means to the state in terms of economics, but also, as Manu mentioned earlier, what it means for the country as national security, while at the same time bridging, right, the concern of reliability. There is 8,760 hours in a year. The hours where the system is the most stressed is probably 1% of that, right? Depending on how you define stress. And it actually doesn't even happen every year, right? So how can we bridge what Pablo mentioned earlier, the fact that we have abundant energy, but we every now and then face that capacity challenge, right? And I think it has to be done not only through maybe it's a combination of things, right? Backup generation, flexibility of load itself, I don't think this is a very popular topic, but even an appropriate ability of curtailing load, right? And I think during Uri it became very apparent how dropping load was very chunky, right? I mean, we're in an AI world right now, and we run a large retail company, and when somebody doesn't pay and doesn't pay for so long, we can individually go and shut down one particular place, right? So I believe that the technology already exists to basically be able to, even if you get to a point like that, which nobody wants to do it at a much more targeted, much more rotational than we have ever done it before. So I think it's really to the extent that we said earlier is we're in an innovation summit. We really have to think about everything that we can do, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 of defense, and even that last layer, right? In the moment in which we actually run out of generation and we need to go into that, even in a world in which we never want to be in, how can we do that even efficiently, right? So I bring that up mainly because to highlight the fact that we have to think about innovation about every single aspect of how we say that we can defend the grid. Thank you.
All right, well, I hope that this hasn't answered every one of your questions, and you will reach out to the folks on the panel here and continue that. We appreciate the chance to get up here and talk about this subject in front of everybody, and hopefully that's kind of giving you a little bit more breadth of the different parts of these issues that we're working on with the large load. Thank you.